This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the AIPIS show for accredited income property investment specialists and those who aspire to be. If you're a real estate, mortgage, or financial professional, this is the place for you. We'll explore innovative investment analysis, sales, marketing, and income-generating strategies for the most historically proven wealth creator, income property. Learn from the experts as they show you how to build a better business and a better life.
It is my pleasure to welcome a returning guest back to the show, and that is Sean O'Toole. He's the founder of Property Radar, formerly Foreclosure Radar. He is going to give us some great insights into the market and into advertising and into what are property buyers, especially wholesalers, what are some of their techniques nowadays that might surprise you? So let's dive into this topic. Sean, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Good to see you. So where do you want to start? Maybe with just the 30,000 foot view of the marketplace and what's going on out there. Just, the overall elevator speech, I think would be a good place to start.
Yeah, I think, I don't know that I have much unique to add, right? We are seeing inventories increasing a little bit finally this year.
Not enough, though.
Not enough.
Yeah.
Some folks that think with the additional inventory, we'll see more sales. We've also seen, interest rates tick up a little bit, so that could mean less sales. I think big picture, we're going to stay in a fairly low sales volume environment until something, significant changes in the market. And we're likely to see, I think inventories continue to creep up a little bit as folks decide to sell. The other, the huge thing is that we have so many folks locked into a low mortgage rate, and that puts a lot of pressure on them to stay in their home rather than to switch homes or, transact like they might normally otherwise. Even if they need to move for some reason, they're likely to keep that house and rent it out versus sell it. So those are some of the things, that I think are really going to keep a lot of, both on the supply side. It's hard to let go of that great mortgage rate and sell. And on the buy side, it's hard to pay these new mortgage rates and buy. So I think lower transaction volumes is, the big picture. Maybe a little better this year than last year, but still.
Yeah, but still overall, the trend being low inventory, lower sales volume. When you have low inventory, you have low sales volume automatically because you don't have enough to sell. And then you have, of course, demand destruction thanks to the high interest rates. So demand is
high
lower.
Prices.
Yeah,
I mean, right. The high prices are actually worse than the high interest rates in terms of demand destruction. I mean,
tell us about that.
Prices now versus 2019. I mean, it's just insane in a lot of areas how fast prices moved up, and they really moved up to unsustainable levels that were, that are a bubble. I don't think it's a bubble that'll burst because we've removed the mechanisms for bursting bubbles, but maybe it'll.
Okay, I got to ask you about that. So it's interesting. You made the remark, high prices. We saw prices go through the roof, obviously. And then you said it's unsustainable. But interestingly, it seems to be not only sustaining, but continuing to appreciate. And Sean, that's one of the things I've been saying, what other asset class could you literally triple the cost of money where, the mortgage rate is essentially tripled, from the very bottom, yet prices continue to increase? That has surprised the doomers and the gloomers and the crash bros like crazy. And so that's surprising. Maybe comment on that. But then the other remark you made.
So, there's a difference between value and price. So if we all had to, just clear the decks, we all got rid of our homes today in our neighborhoods, and we had to rebuy those homes, the people that live there could not rebuy their homes at their current prices.
True.
Prices would have to fundamentally fall. What people that live in an area can afford to pay for a home, to me, is the value of the home, right? Price is what three idiots recently paid.
I love it.
Right? So, because it's the sales comparison approach, to appraisal. It's just three comps, maybe four, maybe five, but it's just a few recent sales. And so you get in a position like this where prices make no sense for the incomes in that area, right? The value's not there. but I need to live there and I'm moving from somewhere else, which has the same thing. I can bring that funny money over and overpay.
Meaning the equity.
Yeah, the equity. But, it's in 2006, we had really high prices, right? And people were like, oh, my home is an investment. It's worth this, right? And this is where, there's a piece here about investing, and I'm not anti-investing. I don't think it's even now is necessarily a bad time to invest. But this idea that price, has something to do with our net worth, right? So we saw people's net worth in 2006 go from here to 2008, 9 down here. But the fundamental value of that house as housing didn't change at all during that period of time, right? It still served the same purpose. It served the same value for us. And so unless you were a buyer or a seller, nothing really changed. And if you bought in 2006 at that peak and you could afford the payment, it served as great housing for you, even though your price went way down. And it's now a good investment again. It just took a little while. So if you're investing, what you want to look at is what's the cash flow, and just forget price. If you go to sell at a time when appreciation is great, that's the icing on the cake. I think the value of investing is that cash flow, that return that you get. And by the way, you have an asset where rents go up over time with inflation and value of the property should come up over time. And as a home, can you afford to live there? And do you like to live there? That's all that matters. All our fascination with price is just, unless you're buying or selling right now, is misplaced.
Okay, so our fascination with prices is misplaced. It's misplaced. Why? Because we're acting like speculators, or we're expecting prices to go up, or what? Just unpack that more.
So right now we have, the median price in my little town is now $1 million, right?
And you're up in the Lake Tahoe area.
Lake Tahoe area. It wasn't that long ago. It was $500,000.
Okay.
Right?
So it's doubled.
It's doubled, right? So if you live in Lake Tahoe and love living in Lake Tahoe, what does that do for you, right? It allows you to borrow some money and put yourself in debt. It allows you that. It allows you to sell, but if you sell, you're just going to lose money on the transaction if you want to buy back. You can sell and leave the area, right? But if you love being here, what does it really do for you that prices have doubled? If anything, it's put pressure on property taxes. Fortunately, here we have Prop 13, which limits how much
they're on the California side. Yeah. Okay.
So a year, but what does it change if you suddenly run around? Well, I've got $500,000 of net worth, of extra net worth, and you start spending like you have that, you're just going to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Your argument, on its face is accurate, I think, but it's always been that way. And granted, it hasn't always been that way in such a short time span. The time span might have been longer, but the concept is exactly the same. And really, it's an argument that it's just the value of the dollar has changed. It's just inflation, okay? Because now
we haven't had 50% inflation over the last 4 years.
Well, all I'm saying is consumer price inflation versus asset inflation are different things, right? Those don't go evenly, as we know. But the wealth effect is there, and it has outpaced consumer prices. So those people do really have more money to spend, right? The people that owned real estate dramatically outpaced the people who didn't. Okay, they got a huge perk. There's this economist that we all know about from 250 years ago or so, Cantillon, right? The Cantillon effect. The people closest to the money printer get the benefit of the money printing first and most. And so you could argue that every homeowner with a mortgage, especially because the inflation has debased the value of that debt, every homeowner got the Cantillon effect. They were closer to the money printer, right? And every investor multiplied that effect because not only did they have their own house probably, but they had multiple investment properties. And if they were leveraged, that really...
Don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting people sell their house, take their chips off the table and go rent, right? But what we just saw is very similar, but opposite to what we saw in the 2005 to 2009 timeframe.
Okay.
Right. So we saw a huge decline in values in that time. And a lot of people thought, oh, you're an idiot for owning real estate during that time. And again, if you invested in real estate in 2005 and 2008, you look like an idiot. But over 10, 20 years, the wealth effect, right? If you're slowly adding dollar cost averaging, whatever, you're building your real estate, even the real estate you bought in 2005 has now worked out to be a great investment.
Well, the interesting thing too is you might have thought you looked like an idiot investing in real estate, but the question nobody asks is you can't hear the dogs that don't bark. What else would you have invested in instead? The stock market took a dive. Precious metals didn't even perform well, surprisingly. I mean, everything was decimated, right? Businesses were decimated. The stock market, nothing performed well during the Great Recession, right? In fact, I would argue that leveraged real estate actually performed the best. Oddly, most people didn't think that way because they have a hard time understanding the multidimensional benefits of the real estate. But,
in 2005, you bought a property that had a 5 cap, and you took advantage of depreciation and other things, the other benefits of owning real estate, right. You did great.
Yeah.
And you still got your 5% return. Now, if you bought speculatively in 2005,
and in the stock market, you might have lost 40%.
Counting on future appreciation. And I think that's right now. Like, if you do good fundamental investing right now, I think it's a great time to invest. Mm-hmm. I would not be doing speculative investing in this market, counting on more appreciation like we've seen the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, that's goes without saying. Couldn't agree more. If you're going to be a speculator, that should only be a small portion of your wealth, 10%, maybe 15 or 20 in the more bull market attitude. But, don't speculate with your main thing, right?
But this is a huge thing, so the run from 2000 to 2005 was also a very quick run up, kind of like we've seen the last handful of years here. And you had a lot of people that were buying in 2005 speculatively. I remember I sold a home to, and I actually tried to talk them out of it, in Stockton, California, epicenter of the foreclosure crisis. He worked in the fields and she was a maid, and they were buying a $400,000 home in Stockton, and they clearly couldn't afford it. And I just said, hey, listen, you shouldn't be buying this house, right? I basically tried to talk them out of it. And they're like, but our brother made $100,000 last year. Our uncle made $100,000 last year. Everybody's making money in real estate except us. And so we're going to buy now with the idea that that's going to happen for us over the next year. I don't think this is that moment.
What you alluded to earlier is how appraisals use 3 comps, right? And obviously residential real estate is sold by the comparison approach. And you said that's just a reflection of what 3 idiots agreed to pay. And yes, you could argue that that's just the greater fool theory, right? Which states, no matter what I pay, some greater fool will come along and pay more. And that's essentially a game of musical chairs. And we've seen how that ends sometimes. But if you're in a market where you have a lot of inflationary pressure in the system, you have a shortage of housing, and you have no path really to create any significant amount of new housing inventory, and you have 15 years of a lack of building, especially of entry-level housing, and you have 15 years or more of really strict underwriting guidelines on mortgages. We have all those things.
Yeah.
Are you a greater fool? It seems like prices are high. I couldn't agree more. But are they in danger of falling in any real way?
So let's get to that. Are they in danger of falling in any real way? So if we roll back the time, roll back to 2005 when I sold all my real estate assets, right? And it was high prices, slowing sales, looks a little bit like today, and certainly looks a lot like last year. Why didn't I sell everything last year? And I did sell everything in 2005.
And why didn't prices go down last year? They went up, right? Yeah, but go ahead.
Well, they still were going. So I'm going to sidetrack on that for a minute, right? So one thing you have to keep in mind is we look at median prices. I sold all my real estate in the Central Valley of California at the beginning of 2006.
Okay.
Across the board, at all price points, prices were falling through all of 2006. And across the board in 2006, median price was going up. Doesn't make any sense, does it?
Okay.
It's true. It's a fact.
Right.
Why did that happen?
But that was only 2006. It wasn't 2007 and 8.
Right. But in 2006, prices were falling and median price was going up. And everybody was saying price is still going up. What happened?
Yeah. Well, we got to remember median and average are obviously different things. Median is just the middle, right? And so, if you have a market skewed toward more high-end properties being built and sold and coming up as inventory, that's going to, influence the median price. If it's a market where you have more low-end and selling and being built, that's going to influence the median price too. Obviously, those influence the average also, but they influence the median more. Right.
So you need to be very careful when you say, oh, the median price is still going up. That doesn't necessarily mean prices are going up. So it's just a little cautionary note, right? That there can be time where people are like, hey, prices are going up, and they're not, right? Yeah. And certainly not at all price points either. So it is good to look at, like you had Mike Simonson on. He's got his thing where he breaks it down by quartiles and shows it's still medians, but it does show a little bit more of what's
a little bit more clarity when you do it that way.
More clarity, right? Yeah. Just got to be a little careful there. Mm-hmm. So why did I sell in beginning of 2006 and didn't sell last year? And the reason was the regulatory framework in 2006 was that banks had to get bad assets off their books as quickly as possible. And so as we started to see foreclosures come up, it was clear that banks would sell those at any price to clear them.
Yeah.
And that actually...
And they were being pressured to do that by the government, right?
They were required by the government to do that, right? And so that was actually the regulatory framework at the time. Post-2009, that regulatory framework has changed to keep homeowners in their home at any price, right? So not that we're going to have no foreclosures, but we're not going to see a repeat of what happened back then. So the question I always ask, once prices go up, their prices are very sticky, right? Us owners don't want to sell for less than what Zillow said our house was worth last month.
Right.
So it becomes very sticky. So you need some sort of distressed seller in the market that has to sell, that forces inventory on the market, that forces prices down. And that's what I don't see in this market right now. And I think that's why prices have been as sticky as they are. I think it would actually be healthier for the market, healthier for realtors, healthier for everyone if prices drop by 20 or 30%. But I don't think it's going to happen because there is not a distressed seller anywhere right now, especially with so many people locked in with low interest rates.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, 25% of the country has a mortgage at or below 3%, 65% of the country at or below 4%. These people are extremely comfortable. And Sean, that's what I always say. I keep beating this drum that there is
something like 40% now are free and clear.
Yeah. Oh, no.
It's an unheard of number of the people that own their home free and clear.
Right. And so they have no pressure. The people with the low rates and lock-in effect and the people with free and clear homes have zero pressure. And I always say the one ingredient you absolutely positively must have for a real estate crash is tens of millions of distressed homeowners who become millions of distressed home sellers. And we have the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
So the people that control the inventory are extremely comfortable. And one of the things I've also been talking about a lot is how the doom and gloomers got it so wrong. When interest rates went up 2 years ago, they were focused on affordability, and they were right. Affordability got terrible. I mean, affordability still is terrible. It's the worst it's been in 4 decades. But that's not what matters. What matters is not new entrants coming into the market. And interestingly, just as an aside, new entrants are coming into the market. I mean, something like 58% of the market now is first-time buyers.
Well, we've got a demographics issue there, right? We've got millennials, and those millennials are getting supported by their baby boomer parents who have $80 trillion
in wealth
to pass along to their kids. And so,
what economists never understand is that eventually, I mean, look, people may complain, they may resist for a while, right? And they did that, and they have been doing that for almost 2 years now. They say, oh, well, housing has become so unaffordable, and it used to be so affordable during the COVID era, right? But that was an anomaly too. That wasn't reality either, okay? And so the delta got really big between their old expectations and the new reality. But eventually, Sean, what they do, what everybody does, because we're all human, is they eventually just capitulate. They eventually just realize, look, this is the new reality. It's not going to change. It's not going to get any better anytime soon. I got to move on with my life. I want to buy a house. I want to start a family. I can't live with my parents forever. I mean, that's the millennials, right? And Zoomers. And they just get on with their lives, and they adjust their expectations downward to what they can get. And that's what's happening.
And the Crash Bros also are, I think we have not historically had this level of inflation and other things. And so they'll look at things like credit card debt and go, oh my gosh, look at this increase in credit card debt.
Yeah.
Right. But if you adjust that credit card debt for wage inflation, so
Right.
people can afford more credit card debt,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
you adjust it for the cost of the goods, right? I would actually argue that our credit card debt's probably lower than it's historically been right now.
I would agree with you. I'm
That's
so
a
glad you
scary
said
looking
that.
chart on Twitter, right? That's a scary looking chart on Twitter that, oh shit, we're in trouble.
Yep.
But you have to adjust these things based on, kind of where things are at now, where wages are at now, et cetera, where incomes are. So a lot of the things I see from the Crash Bros, as you call them, it's just bad analysis.
Yeah, it is. It's very surface level, shallow analysis. And, I'm so glad you said that about the credit card debt. And if you look at overall debt, of course, they've got the same kind of arguments about auto debt and so forth. But look, a lot of people really are just skipping the whole car ownership thing too, right? You really don't need a car the way you used to must have a car, okay?
Depending on where you live.
Yeah, of course, but we have a lot of on-demand options nowadays that weren't there before. I mean, look, I'm currently in Arizona where they have these driverless Waymo cars running around. I downloaded the app. I can't wait to get in one of them. I'm going to do it today. Now,
awesome.
Hopefully I'll still be alive tomorrow.
The odds are good.
Yeah, and they're cheaper than Uber. And they're cheaper than Lyft because they have no driver, right? And so they're really quite cheap. Like I last night, I was on my phone, I was looking at their app, and I was looking at some routes, and I was thinking, mostly when I go to a city now, I don't bother to rent a car anymore. It's just too much hassle to wait in line and rent a car. I just take on-demand services around, and I find that it's much easier, much cheaper, and it's just really a better way to go. When I turned 16, I couldn't wait to get my driver's license. I mean, that was like,
Yes.
For a Gen Xer, that was the first thing I'm going to do. I want to be able to take girls out on dates. I want a car. I want the freedom of a car. Now, I didn't own a car. I used my mom's car, but I still could drive it, right? And now they don't even care if they get their license. It's like they're waiting until they're 21.
Friends' kids are 18 and they don't have their license yet. I'm like,
it's a different world. That's the point. And so you're right about the credit card debt. And the same thing is true about the housing inventory levels. Because you know what those don't adjust for is the population. And so if we go with like Mike's estimate and most
even lower
estimate of 1.2 million homes for sale at any given time being the normal level of inventory, well, that was true 8-10 years ago, when the population was lower than it is today. So you've got to really adjust that like you adjust a chart of credit card debt for inflation.
It needs to be higher. Yeah. It needs to have grown. And, we've got a huge problem here in California with, just NIMBYism and, the state's trying to tackle that and the cities are fighting back. And, it's kind of a crazy thing. But the bottom line is we're not building enough inventory. And, while the state's trying to change some of the zoning laws and force some things on cities, at the same time, they're passing all these crazy laws, that just keep the cost of building going up and up and up. I built a home a while back, and the foundation had to survive both a 100-year flood and a 100-year earthquake at the same time, right? And the foundation cost was more than like a single family home cost would have been in Texas, right? It was ridiculous.
Yep.
And in downtown Truckee, and most of these buildings down here were built in the 1800s. They're more than, 100 years old.
Right.
And they're all still standing.
Yeah.
And they work just fine. And so we've really made new affordable housing illegal.
I love it. I love it. That's exactly. Hey, folks, that is a quote from Sean O'Toole. We have made new affordable housing illegal. I'm so glad you said that. That is absolutely true. And Sean, that's another misnomer about prices. When you look at price history of housing, they're not adjusting for square footage usually. In 1970, the typical home was 1,500 square feet. Today, it's 2,300 square feet. Just ever so recently, the builders started shrinking their homes to try and meet buyer demand at the lower end of the market. So that is reversing a bit. But
a little bit of that, and then also a lot of the 2-bedroom homes for 55 plus communities is the other thing that's shifting that down a little bit. But you think it shifted up even with all the 55 home communities being built that are only 2 bedrooms. And it was still shifting up with that. So which is crazy because There were houses in my hometown, the little dingbat houses we call them. They were 900 square feet, 3 bedrooms. That product doesn't exist anymore, but that used to be the affordable housing. And now that 50-year-old housing is the affordable housing, and nothing new is affordable.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, oh no, what I was going to say is the quality of construction of those new homes, like my house that I recently sold in Florida. I mean, I never lived in a house like that, Sean. It was built like a tank. I couldn't believe the sturdiness of that house. I mean, the houses I had in California were built out of paper mache, but the Florida house, I mean, because of the hurricane standards, you can't build an affordable house anymore. That's the point. Yeah.
So the building codes, they're good. They've just made affordable housing illegal. Like, and they have their benefits, right? They're great. They're better for the environment. They're more likely to withstand, whatever, flood, fire, hurricanes, et cetera. But, it's just not affordable. And, most of that affordable housing that used to be legal to build is still standing. And it's been 50 years. So was that really such a bad thing to build?
Yeah,
this is better.
Couldn't agree more. And Sean, they've done the same thing with cars, right? You've seen a lot of reports over the past couple of years, the end of the $20,000 car, right? And cars are much more technologically based than real estate, right? So you'd think that the price declines in automobiles would be very significant because they're basically tech items, to a large extent.
And computers and TVs and everything else has declined.
Right. But now the cars, with all the safety standards, I mean, of course, we've got now, I remember when I bought my first car that had an airbag. And I remember talking to the salesman about how much that one airbag in the steering wheel cost. And, it was like, at the time, it was like $3,000. And we had this whole conversation about how that made the car so much more expensive. And he said, look, your insurance company views the airbag as a lower cost than the cost of fixing your face, right, when you have an accident. And fair enough. But now we've got surround airbags in these cars and a million safety features and a million safety systems. So it's not the same car. It's not the same house either.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And,
all right.
And the houses that we're building today are better. There's no question.
Yeah.
Cost a lot more, and it's removed that entry-level product that, here in California is hurting our people who want to be teachers and firefighters and, the service.
And even with the laws that they made about accessory dwelling units or ADUs, that's not really helping because those are so darn expensive to build.
It's still very expensive to build.
Yeah. So, Sean, I want to switch gears before we wrap it up and have you talk, and I know you've got a couple of graphics to share that are interesting, about something that most people wouldn't see and they wouldn't be privy to. It's kind of what happens behind the scenes in the real estate market with this whole cottage group of real estate wheeler dealers called wholesalers. Okay.
Yeah.
Most of my listeners know what wholesalers are. And these are people that get a property under contract and then they resell the contract and assign it to somebody else. But they're acting differently than they used to. And that is an indicator as to what's going on in the real estate market. Not everybody's watching this on video, but what does this graphic tell us about what's going on in the real estate market?
So my company, we track data on every property and every transaction in the US. And we used to be mostly used for due diligence and mostly used by foreclosure investors. But more and more people are using us to do lead gen, to go find deals. So wholesalers use us a lot to go find the deals that they do. And a lot of our investors, though, would just buy deals from wholesalers, right? Because they were interested in doing the fix and flip and making the property nice and the rest. So I'm going to break down here an example of what kind of a traditional deal looks like. A wholesaler goes out and buys a house, gets a house under contract, I should say, for $200,000, right? They take $20K, add to that, and they find an investor to buy it for $220K. That investor goes through, and between commissions and repairs and the rest, they end up, putting $50K into the property. They make $30K. So the wholesaler, for just finding the lead and handing that lead off, they never even necessarily take title to the property, make 40% of the total money made on the deal. And the investor, who takes all the risks, puts out their cash, does all the repairs, takes the market risk over time, and all the rest, makes 60%, right? And this is kind of the way things have worked for quite a while. And if you're an investor, it's like, really, why aren't you going and getting the deal yourself, right? Now, the other side that's happening is that it's getting so hard to find the deals that the wholesalers that are finding the deals are going, wait a second, why am I only taking 20K? They still don't want to take on the risk. They still don't want to do the work, but they're finding instead they can relist these properties as is on the MLS, something called wholetailing. They can now make 60% or more and just flip it directly to an owner that wants to buy a fixer. And there's enough of that happening in the market that we're seeing a pretty big shift here where investors that used to rely on wholesalers can no longer rely on wholesalers to find deals because those wholesalers are selling to that end consumer directly. And the wholesalers are making more money on their deals. And that's forcing these investors to go out and do lead generation and find their own deals, which has been great for us as a business.
And so you're sort of calling the investor the fix and flipper, the person who's doing a remodel and improving the property and then keeping it as a buy and hold rental, right?
They may keep it in this example, right? They're selling it and they just do a fix and flip and they're selling. But also, if you're doing the buy and hold, you're now going to pay a greater premium to that wholesaler for finding the deal than if you go out and find the deal yourself. It's still hard to find deals, but it's becoming more and more worthwhile if your goal is to do buy and hold or to do fix and flips, is to go find that deal yourself rather than rely on a wholesaler. And for the wholesalers, though, it's good news because they're making more money selling the deals that they find directly to consumers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So what does this tell us about the market, though, Sean? Most people listening or watching aren't wholesalers. They're buy and hold investors. They just want to buy usually a rent-ready property, rent it out, hold it, and create wealth over time.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Like, why is this happening?
I mean, the bottom line issue is just the lack of inventory, right? It's given the wholesalers this new channel where they can wholesale out to the market rather than have to go through an investor and get it cleaned up and ready for market. So it's given them a new option, and it's a sign of the lack of inventory in the market.
Yeah, so just the lack of inventory. This is a symptom of that, in the way people are acting in the background. Yeah, interesting.
But it's Sean, pretty big shifts in the in the investor world, but both for the rehab and for the flip, fix, and flip folks.
Yeah,
really
sure
shifts in relationships and how the whole market works.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Anything else you want to share with us? Anything I didn't ask you that you want to make sure our listeners and viewers know?
Yeah, I think the big one that I get asked a lot, and in fact, I'm working with a reporter right now on some increases in foreclosures in like Houston and certain parts of Florida and other things. I think there's still a lot of concern out there about foreclosures. I was on 60 Minutes explaining the foreclosure crisis to Steve Kroft back in 2008. So that's kind of what I'm most known for.
That's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And the regulatory changes plus the amount of equity in the market, we'll continue to see foreclosures. There will continue to be people that don't make their payments and lose their house in that way. But we're not going to see a downturn in price and anything like we saw in 2008. So anytime you see a crash bro telling that story, you can just wholesale dismiss it. There's no data to support that. There's not the regulatory framework to support that. They're just misinformed. And I think that one for sure of all the crash bro stories is the most ludicrous.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I like to say someday they will be right. Of course, there are always cycles. Of course, there will be crashes and booms. But when these comfortable people have either no mortgage at all, or they have 27 years left on their mortgage, it's not coming anytime soon, this crash you're waiting for, folks. So don't hold your breath, right?
But, I guess the balance to that is in 2016, I ran around giving a presentation basically saying why things were going to be fairly calm, kind of for the foreseeable future until the next black swan. And I had a slide that had all the different black swans on it, right? And one of them happened to be a pandemic. Mm-hmm. And that turned out to be the next thing. But there's lots of black swans. AI is a black swan. I mean, people don't realize that yet, just like the internet was a black swan. It will kill certain things and benefit other things. Yep. And it's going to cause change in the market. I don't think it's one that's going to harm real estate prices, but we do live, I would say, largely in a crisis cycle economy where we move from one crisis to the next. And what I thought would happen in the slideshow I gave in 2016 is that in the next crisis, we would do a good job with reflation, because that's kind of what we do as a country, or what most countries now do, right? Is you do a combination of stimulus and other things.
So you said the word you used was reflation, right?
Reflation.
Got it. Okay.
Right. And so after 2020, we took kind of the steps we took after past crisis. We did a little faster, a little more aggressively, so the downturn wouldn't be as long. And we kind of did the right steps, except we missed the fact that we killed supply by sending everybody home. And that combination, we ended up not just reflating the economy, but then resulting in inflation. So that was a pretty big misstep.
Yeah.
And you could say, oh, we put too much money into the economy. I think it's equal to say we sent too many people home, and we should have found a way to keep supply up.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
But we missed the mark on that one. So that's the big question. When we have the next crisis, whatever it is, I expect we'll see low interest rates again. I think in my lifetime, I will see interest rates in the ones.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I think I'll see interest rates in the ones with 40-year fixed financing in the United States as a way to get us out of some black swan.
Right.
Because that's the way we deal with crisis. We lower interest rates and we put stimulus in. And
Sean,
that will be the next thing.
Another brilliant thing you shared. I don't know about the 1%, if for 40 years, if that's going to happen. I hope it does. But can you imagine prices will go through the roof if that happens? That'll be insane. Now, it will peel off some sellers, but they're just going to rebuy and buy as much as they possibly can because they've got massive amounts of equity, right? So, and their equity will skyrocket. But what's so interesting about what you said, although you didn't completely say it, and I want to finish the thought for you, is that we all have to understand. I mean, look, Ken McElroy, he's a friend and business partner of mine, right? We all know Ken McElroy, been on the show many times. During COVID, when COVID started, he was making dire predictions about the end of the world. He said, in fact, one of his videos, he said, this year is over, write it off, forget it. Don't touch, don't do anything, right? And later he admitted why he called that wrong. And he said to me, he said, I didn't count on what the government and the central bank would do, right? And what we have to realize is that we live in a centrally planned economy. Now, look, as a free market guy, I hate that. Okay, but we have what we have. It is what it is,
and it's not just us; it's most advanced
of the world, of course, almost virtually all of the world.
Yes.
Okay, when they say, well, there's a G7 meeting, a G20 meeting, whatever, all they're meeting about is how to print money. That's what the meeting is always about. Yeah, there are some flavors of it, but essentially it's increase the money supply to prevent the crisis and reflate. And that's the thing. You always have to count on, look, the central planners have a vested interest in, it's aligned with you if you own real estate and you use mortgages, especially on that real estate, because they're going to reflate and they're going to loosen the money supply, loosen the credit supply. That's always the response to whatever crisis of the du jour we have. And yeah, it's really good that you pointed that out.
It's because we have no fiscal policy too in the US, it makes it even worse, right?
Yeah.
So if we had a functioning Congress, there are other things we could do that would work better. But we leave all of this on the back of the Fed. So it's these very crude levers that they pull, and they create these asset inflations as a result. And of course, we got inflation this last time too, which is, really unfortunate. But it is. There's the lack of function in Congress. It makes this even more likely to happen next time at maybe even greater scale.
It's like when you run out of energy, 1 cup of coffee will help, 2 cups of coffee will help more, but there's a diminishing return. And that means they just have to print more and more and more each time. And so it makes the problem worse and worse, or better and better, depending on what side you're on.
We've been doing this since 2000, right? So we learned a little bit after 2000. We did it again in 2008, then to 2020, and it will be what we do with some modifications. Now, the one thing that I will say is that I don't know that the Fed will do it as aggressively if inflation's still high. And, a lot of people feel the Fed went the wrong way with pushing rates up as high as they did to try to break inflation.
Yep.
Right now, it's looking like maybe they didn't do enough. And I know that sounds terrible right now, but would we rather have a short period of pain followed by a long period of calm than, not having done enough and continuing to have inflation be a problem? So we'll see how that all plays out. But
it's easy to be an armchair quarterback, and I'm saying this for myself.
Yeah.
But they should have raised rates much sooner and much more slowly. That would have been the recipe. I mean, Powell kept sticking with his transitory narrative for way too long, when it wasn't transitory anymore. So, that was their mistake. Sean, great talk with you. Love having you on. We got to do this more often. Give out your website and tell people where they can learn more about you and your company.
Yeah, propertyradar.com is definitely the place to start. I'm also on, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all of those normal places, and usually pretty easy to find. It's usually like /Sean O'Toole, but you'll find me no problem.
Good stuff. Sean O'Toole, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.